Assalamu alaikum. This is Umar, and we are live with another episode of Coffee with Gohar. And today's guest is Mr. Zouhair Khaliq, and you are going to hear Mr. Gohar now.
Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon to all of you. This is Gohar Sharif with Coffee with Gohar. And in today's talk, we have Mr. Zouhair Khaliq, who is an international business executive for more than 34 years of global experience in the field of telecom and technology. He is heading National Incubation Center, Islamabad, and he was the co-founder of Teamup Incubation Center. Mr. Zouhair Khaliq has been on the forefront of setting up companies, running the big businesses, and then moving on to new pastures and greener pastures, perhaps creating most of them. He started with one man, one CFO company, Mobilink. He started that way back in June 1993, and he launched the whole team from there. He built it up from one man to 31 million customers. Remarkable, amazing stories of success stories of Mr. Zouhair Khaliq. And the revenues he touched in that company went up to the tune of 1.4 billion, making it one of the 5 fastest growing companies in Pakistan. He has led all the operations in Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, and Iraq. And he has been on the forefront of many companies, Holding, Gemini Holding, Savaris Family, Motorola. He is currently a member of the Prime Minister's Task Force since December 2000. Welcome to Coffee with Gohar.
Thank you so much, Gohar. Thank you for your introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to have you on this Coffee with Gohar. Let's start with your early childhood. Where did you started as a early schooling? Where were you born and where was your early schooling?
So that's an interesting question as far as I'm concerned. It's a long answer. I was born in Karachi, but at the age of 2, I actually my father moved to Saudi Arabia. So I spent the next 2.5 years in Mecca, literally a stone's throw from the then Kaaba location. It's changed a lot, obviously, over the years, but that's where I started life in a way. And a couple of years later, moved to Riyadh, where we stayed another 5 years. And I went to an American school. It was called the Ford Foundation International School, Riyadh. And my initial education was all there. Then followed by a brief stint in Karachi at St. Patrick's High School, followed by Islamabad Model School, G6 in Islamabad, very run-of-the-mill school just across the road from everybody.
Right.
And then at that stage, I moved abroad. My father moved again abroad, and he moved to Abu Dhabi at the time, which was just a very young startup kind of city in 1974. And at that point, there were schools of the kind that I was, old enough to go to. And so I was sent to boarding school in the United Kingdom. So I went to a school in Reading called Leighton Park. And I did my A-levels from that institution. Had a lovely time and also a very bad time because I was the only Muslim and the brown person in the entire school. So there was a lot of prejudices and discrimination actions to overcome at that stage. But that's all behind, and in retrospect, it was a lovely school with lovely people. I'm in touch with a lot of them now. So, 45 some years later. The experience was good.
Okay.
And then I went on to do my chartered accountancy in London, studying and working at the same time as one does for chartered accountancy. So I used to work 12, 14 hours a day, followed by about 3 hours, 4 hours of study, private time, and then, find time to get some sleep and back to the grind the next morning. So that was kind of the early days. Came back to Pakistan when I was about 24 years old. And initially started life as all good accountants do. I qualified as a chartered accountant in the UK with A.F. Ferguson's, or PwC as it's known. Spent literally 7 or 8 months there and got restless and decided to apply for a job at a company called ICI PLC. I got hired. I got hired as the group chief internal auditor initially, then as corporate finance manager, and later as the CFO of their soda ash business, which was the second largest business that ICI ran at the time. So those were the initial years of professional career and education. And again, 7 years later, as I say, the 7-year itch, I got restless and wanted to do something more exciting, something different from bulk chemicals. And so I applied. I actually got headhunted to a company which was known at the time as Instaphone, owned by the Millicom Group.
Okay.
And I spent a year there,
Right.
and again realized that maybe I'd made a mistake in terms of the kind of professionalism and atmosphere that they had at the company. And I decided to leave again. I didn't have a job for a few months, and I got approached again by a company at that time unheard of in Pakistan. It was called Motorola. And they were looking to set up a new company in the mobile cellular business. It was supposed to be GSM, which was a new technology at the time. This is sort of early 1993, as you referred to earlier. And hence, after a couple of interviews and 6 weeks in Chicago, where I was probably interviewed more times than I can care to remember, I was finally offered the job. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Amazing success story. You have gone from one strength to another and from one company to another, and you have moved on in your life.
Thank you. God has
amazing journey, success story. But in the process, have you burnt your fingers in the process from one success story to another?
Yes, many times. I mean, as I referred earlier, the Ferguson experience, I cut short myself. The Instaphone experience, I cut short myself. Both times, realizing that I had entered a field that I didn't want to be part of, and I wanted to move on, or rather a company or an atmosphere where I needed to move on. And then subsequently, as I went through life, I've had many times when I've started companies, failed them, or they failed, and I had to move on again. There was a time in the UK when I moved after Motorola, where I was part of a young company called W Cities. And they had one of the best, amazing technologies, if you look back on it. And today, you know it as Google Maps, but back then it was wcities.com.
Okay.
And they were going nowhere. They went bust. I was the last employee on as the CFO to wind it up, liquidate it. I didn't get paid for the last 6 months of my tenure there. And when I left, I had no money to pay for my mortgage or the private school fees of my 2 children. And, as I said, God's been kind. And things happened, something else came along, and I kind of restarted career again. And it's happened, I mean, I can go on and on. It's probably a half a dozen times where things have not worked out. And you find that you have to end up reinventing yourself, reimagining who you are, what you are capable of doing, and then start again. And that's life. I think that's how we all go through. And I don't consider myself, special in that circumstance. I think it happens to everybody, and you have to deal with it. You have to cope with it, and you just have to move on.
Yeah, and this is all about standing up every time you fall, and resilience. This is all about the strength.
Dust yourself off, and you have to, dust off the dirt, and the failure, and you have to find yourself again.
Very, very well. So then you formed a co-founder, as a co-founder, Teamup.
Gee.
So this Teamup, what did you visualize at that time?
So this was the latest of the many adventures and escapades, if you will. And this was about 4 years ago, 2016, when a former colleague and a dear friend, we were sitting in a cafe in London, having coffee and saying, what is it that we can do to give back to Pakistan? Both of us were fortunate that we had, long established careers that we had reasonable success at in our lives. And it was time to look back and say, what can you give back? And so Teamup came around, and the initial idea was simply to do online mentoring as kind of discussions like we are doing right now, basically to say we would guide and mentor young people who were looking for an entrepreneur career and help them and motivate them. And again, God works in strange ways. We found out a few months later that the government of Pakistan, through the Ministry of IT and Telecom, were actually looking to set up a national incubation center. And we got into discussions. We helped frame some of the way things might happen. They put out an RFP, and we were competing against 7 or 8 other very well-known and very established entities, all from the development sector or the academic sector. And to, as we often say, Parvez, my very dear partner, and I always say, we were utterly shocked and horrified when we got the license, and hence started a whole new period in our lives, because we had to literally reinvent everything. We had to start from scratch. We had to figure out what to do. And set up a national incubation center. So, but I think what helped both of us in that venture was the fact that we had, fallen over many times before. We had recreated things. We had started things from scratch. We had hired teams from nowhere. And all of that came into this equation as well. And Teamup came about. Initially, we were only the service delivery partner to the National Incubation Center, along with our partners, the Ministry of IT and Telecom, the Ignite Fund, the Ignite Technology Fund, and Mobilink, now called Jazz. And these are our partners, and we run it together. As I said, the service delivery is from Teamup. We found subsequently that Teamup could do a lot of other things as well. And so we're also now Teamup Advisory, which is an advisory and consulting business where we help multinationals and corporations to go through a digital and an organizational transformation, and also strategy and M&A and all the stuff that advisors normally do. So that's the other thing we do. And we're now in the process of setting up probably a Teamup venture capital fund, hopefully, inshallah, in the next few months as we work through this whole coronavirus, COVID-19 situation. And that's kind of where Teamup is at the
moment. Looking at your current position and the initiative you are in, does Pakistan have the same kind of influence to attract these venture capitals companies to come in and support the initiative, or would be looking towards our neighbors for that matter?
Gee. So again, that's an interesting question, Gohar, because 3 or 4 years ago, when we entered the fray, and let me clarify, there were other incubation centers around the country at that time too. But what was significant was that apart from a few angel investors and sort of, very small time sort of friends and family investors, there were no venture capital funds in Pakistan. But it's very exciting today when you look around the ecosystem that there are between 12 and 15 venture capital funds in Pakistan today, registered and or focused on Pakistan. And between them, they have funds available somewhere between 300 and 500 million US dollars today, which are all going to be invested in young entrepreneurs and startups as we speak. And again, I think that's a tremendous journey over the last 3 years where things have just caught on very quickly. And in the recent past, in the last few weeks, we've also seen the government step up, and the SECP, for example, has made a number of changes in their regulatory system to recognize startups, which was something that had never happened before. And the category only went down to what was called the SME sector, the small medium enterprise. But startups are somewhere much lower in the ecosystem, and it takes them a while to get to that SME and corporation status eventually, inshallah.
Definitely, inshallah. So government support is there as far as your initiative is concerned, and now probably things are much better as they were 3-4 years ago. Probably CCP and some others, they are realizing that entrepreneurship and the startup needs a helping hand, probably.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of work has gone into it from all quarters, obviously through the ecosystem. Some of the venture capital funds, once they become active, they've been having talks with the government and people who matter. Obviously, we've led a lot of these talks ourselves through Teamup and through the NIC. And I think it's been a combined effort. You referred to the fact that I sit on the Prime Minister's Task Force on IT and Telecom. And a whole section of that task force also is focused on startups and entrepreneurship. And so it's been a very combined effort, a real teaming up, if you will, of resources from all around us to try and influence and dare I say the word, educate people to look towards startups as something that is very, very critical, very essential to the future of Pakistan.
With a vision like yours and a battle-hardened team of your Teamup and your colleagues and government's blessing, probably the only ingredient left is the raw material. Do we have the talent? Do we have the people here in Pakistan, the youth or the middle executive level people who are going to take this torch ahead?
So a couple of answers there, Gohar. One, we have enormous talent. MashaAllah, this country is overflowing with talent. And people with amazing ideas, amazing skill sets. Now, what does a startup typically lack in the beginning, apart from the usual stuff about funds and mentoring and so on? What essentially a startup team lacks is that level of experience of running something, you would use the word executive skills. Those are frequently, in fact, almost always missing because they have come from a different world and they are just beginning to get into something which will eventually become a successful corporation. So let me address that on various levels. So what we do at Teamup and at the National Incubation Center is exactly to encourage those people to come up with the great ideas, which there are, there's no dearth of, as I said earlier. To give you an example, the last cohort we ran, the applications came in, there were over 1,100 some applications. We chose, after much, selection and interviewing and shortlisting, we chose 25 people to onboard, 25 teams to onboard to the NIC. We recently ran a hackathon on health, which after the COVID situation hit everybody. And we did this as a worldwide phenomenon. And over 1,600 applications came through. And again, we ended up choosing 3 who won the 3 top prizes. So the competition is tough, it's there, but the talent is also there. And it's quite amazing. And one of the major reasons that I came back to the country again was because in my days at Mobilink, I realized that we had so much talent in this country. All they needed was a platform and an opportunity to come together and to move on and express themselves in the right way. So that's a long-winded answer to what I'm trying to say to you. And I think the future is fantastic because these guys are coming up with world-class ideas. They're coming up with ideas ranging across the spectrum from, whether it's e-commerce or e-health, ed-tech, or fintech, or so many other things that are on the horizon. It's all there. And what the NIC does is give them a platform to guide them, to mentor them, and to ensure that they are able to succeed with the ideas that they bring forward.
Great. To management of...
Sorry, I can't hear you, Gohar. Your voice is breaking up. Could you repeat?
Yeah. Now coming to the topic of management of
I'm sorry, the voice is completely gone. I'm unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Gee, a little bit better. Thank you.
You hear me now clearly?
No, G, I can't. Unfortunately, I can't. It's a lot of noise in the back.
Okay, let me try one more. Ji, Zouhair sir, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. When it comes to stress management on a personal level, into so many launches and mergers. So when it comes to your, how you manage, how do you manage what?
Gee, again, breaking up, but I understood that the question is about stress management, how I do that on a personal level, correct?
Yeah.
So again, stress is, again, part of life. It happens every time you wake up in the morning. You have stress of something or the other. And, some of it you have to use to motivate yourself and move yourself in the right direction. Because if you don't have stress or pressure, then you're probably not going to move in the right direction. So that part is the good part of stress. The other part is how you handle the rest of it without it destroying you or making you completely inadequate and ineffective. And I think the way I've managed it over the years is, one, you've got to have yourself a routine. Whether you are going to work every morning or not, as the case is right now, we're all working from home in various capacities, for example. And I've done that over the years in many ways that I've described earlier, when I was not in a job at the time, looking for the next one, or just trying to reinvent myself and doing something different. And often enough, in one stage in my life, and even today, as an advisory member to various boards and as non-executive director on boards, you end up with a less structured lifestyle. And I think the best way to do that, to manage that and to eliminate stress from it, is to have a very, very well-defined routine. So I still get up around the same time every morning. I still go through the same rituals every day, even if it is, just sitting in front of a computer. I don't want to shock my computer by not having a shower and not being washed. So I make sure I am, and I've done that. And and then go through the day in a structured fashion, have an agenda, have a calendar, have slots where you do various things, and at the end of which, or in the middle of which, you must allow something in terms of exercise, for example. It takes your mind off. And again, people, when I say exercise, people will think about a gym or some kind of fancy equipment, but all you need to do is put on a pair of comfortable shoes and go for a walk. Everybody can afford to do that.
Right.
And admire the trees and whatever is around you, and savor that for a little bit. If you can afford to, go swimming or whatever else that you can manage. Also, take out time to read and to digest other things apart from and social media. And I'm as guilty as anybody else. And if you check with my family right now, they laugh. But we all need to switch off social media because it creates stress in our lives as well. Uncertainty creates stress in our life. And to get away is the exercise, maybe reading something. You see a lot of books in the background. When I moved from London at the age of 24 back to Pakistan, I had one box of clothes and I had about 5 boxes of books. And so it just gives you, the idea that it's important to read, to discover, to find new ideas and new theories going out from different people, their thought processes. And all of that combines itself to relieve some of the stress that you might be going through. And of course, there's prayer.
Okay, great.
If you're a religious person or not a religious person. But prayer helps, reaching out to a higher being, to your God, to Allah. I think it helps. It helps the process of worrying less and giving away some of it as a sort of a prayer to God Himself, and then working hard. I think that's the only way to get out of all of this.
Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Now we are into the last segment, which is the wrap-up section, and keeping in view the Corona and post-Corona world, in which the world has changed so much in just 3 months. What message would you like to give to the people of Pakistan in terms of resilience, in terms of hope, in terms of future of Pakistan? What should they do? What should they look for in the coming months?
Well, look, first of all, I think we have to put all of this in perspective, especially the young people who may be going through a crisis of this sort for the first time. I was reading a very lovely blog the other day. And, if you look at just the last century, and for those of us who lived through it, or you and I are obviously are fitting into that category, so many things happened. You had World War I, you had World War II, you lost 20 million people in World War I, I think 75 million in World War II. You had the 1929 crash where 28% of the GDP of the world was wiped out. 1 in 4 people were unemployed throughout the world. And that was just the early part of the century. But if you walk through the rest of the century, and some of that even I've lived through, in 1978, there was the oil crisis when the Saudis decided to, and through OPEC, and hiked up the oil pricing. And basically the economies around the world crashed. Not too far away from there and not too far from where we are today was 1998 when Pakistan conducted a nuclear test and we froze the dollar, the rupee, and people lost their fortunes. My father, his entire pension was wiped out because he had just retired. He'd come back, he'd put his money in dollars to some extent, and he lost most of it. In 2002, and I was right of that one, where throughout the Western world you had a complete crash of the IT and telecom industry, and I was the victim to that. I was unemployed for months because people overbid for 3G licenses at the time and didn't work out. If you look at 2008 and the the collapse of the banking system in the Western world at the time. All very recent in our past. Things have happened. And this will continue.
Right.
But the point I'm trying to make is this too shall pass. And one day you'll wake up and you will find new things to do, new things are happening. They're already happening in Pakistan today. And I put my entire money's worth into two buckets in Pakistan today. And one of them is the youth of Pakistan.
Okay.
And the other one is digitization. And if you bring those two together, some of which exactly what we do at the National Incubation Center, but I'm not saying everybody can come and join the National Incubation Center. I'm saying that our youth has tremendous resilience.
Yes, exactly.
It has tremendous talent. And we should look towards them for a lot of what's going to happen in the future. And as we are doing today, I mean, Gohar, we would probably be sitting in front of a television studio in the past doing what we're doing right now. But here we are on Facebook Live and StreamYard, or we go to Zoom or other technologies. People are going more and more towards digitization. Fintech is happening more in Pakistan, which hadn't happened in years. Even government entities, and I'm a member of a board of a couple of them right now, have finally discovered Zoom as a means of communication. So things are happening to drive us towards that phenomenon. And I think the future of Pakistan will be in terms of adapting and embracing more digitization and encouraging more of our youth and investing more in our youth to come forward with new technology, new solutions, new ideas, which will carry us forward. And when you have 20 million young people in the country who are, brimming with ideas, whether it doesn't matter which economic strata they're from, if they are there, all we need to be able to do is look towards them and say, let's help and let's get this thing on the road. And I think Pakistan will have, mashallah, a very, very bright future because there is so much to do. A lot of things that the world has already done, we still have to do. And whether, as I said earlier, I'll repeat myself, whether it's in automating and digitizing our agricultural base, whether it's about our education system, where we should really be following the sort of digitized process of transferring knowledge to rural villages and towns and so on. Whether it's about, our medical services, again, a lot of it is happening right now because of COVID. We are being gently coerced or gently nudged through to a whole new world where I think if we keep inventing, we keep embracing the stuff, we will have a fantastic future, inshallah.
Thank you. This too shall pass, and definitely, inshallah, with the vision like Zouhair Khaliq, people like you and your Teamup, and your colleagues, we look forward to hearing more from you. And in terms of advice, guidance for the youth and people of Pakistan, and I wish you and your team all the best in your current and future endeavors. Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to have you on this Coffee with Gohar.
Can I just leave you with some last words, Gohar, before you sign off?
Please, sir, please.
So it's a phrase I saw in a little travel agency shop many, many, many years ago when I was at one of my lowest ebbs. And it's something that has carried me through. And it's just 3 lines. It says, trust in God, believe in yourself, and dare to dream.
Zabardast. Dare to dream. Dare to dream. Definitely, that's the way. Thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure. And my dear viewers, this was Coffee with Gohar, and this was the launch of GS Masterclass with the Master Zouhair Khaliq. My pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.